this video, I thought I'd try something a little bit different. Instead of just going through a particular song and making some points about theory, I thought I'd come from the other direction, just talk about some theory, put it in context of some different songs. So the official topic of this video is the Dorian mode, but the broader scope is to get people a little bit more comfortable thinking about modes as a way of helping the soloing that is always a challenge for intermediate guitarists such as myself. I'm going to try to give you a little bit of the foundations for some modes, which will let you build on stuff that I think you've probably already got. All right, so let's start diving in. Let's start off with a bunch of songs that are built around an A minor, since that's such a common place for people to work from, and it'll be a good starting point for us to try out different modes, different scales. So let's imagine you're with some friends and they say, all right, let's play this song, which is sort of a variation of that Mudcrutch song that Tom Petty did. A minor, G, E minor, D. Now, what would you think about if you were going to try to solo over that? Well, since you see the A minor, the tempting thing to do is just to reach for the A minor pentatonic and start working off of that. And you can get a lot of mileage out of the pentatonic scale, the minor pentatonic. God knows, so many great guitarists, from the blues guys to Hendrix to others, have gotten tons of mileage out of that. But it's hard to find, when you're just using those 5 notes, to not find yourself repeating yourself. It'd be nice to add some extra notes in it. So how can you do that? Well, let's go about it a little bit systematically. Think about starting with what an A major scale looks like, so that we can see the difference between A major and an A minor pentatonic, and then we can start building on some modes from there. So an A major pentatonic scale, sorry, A major scale is going to have these notes. A is your 1, B is your 2, C sharp is your 3, D is your 4, E is your 5, F sharp is your 6, G sharp is your 7th, and then your octave 8. Now, one of the disadvantages, I think, of the way in which people often learn guitar is we just learn patterns and often don't learn the notes behind them, and we don't learn things like what's the 1 and what's the 3. But getting yourself into that habit of trying to think about what notes you're actually playing and what position they are within a scale is going to really help you, I think, develop your ear and also give you some more options for moving around the neck. So you don't have to just memorize patterns. You'll be able to remember, hey, if it's an A major scale, it's got these notes, which means any place I start on the neck, I can find those notes. If I want to start up here, I know I'm going to start with the A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. So we've got A major. Let me show you it on the screen. Now, when we go from that A major over to the A minor pentatonic, let's just think about what it is that we've changed. In the A minor pentatonic, we've got A, C, D, E, G, A. So we've got 1, we've got C sharp is flattened to C, so A, B, C, or A, B, C. The 4th, D, the 5th, E. Then we've taken that G sharp, the 7th, and we've flattened it, the flat 7th. So starting up on the A here, we've got A, C, D, E, G, A. So let's just look at what we've done now, put it on the screen, the modification we've made to that A major to get to that A minor pentatonic. All right, now we come to the crunch time. When we've got A, C, D, E, that's our fifth. Then we've been moving from the fifth all the way up to that flat seventh, the G, going from E to G. But what about the notes in between? We could have used an F, we could have used an F sharp. If we used the F sharp, we would be using something closer to the A major scale, or we could use the F. That would be to focus on which of the 6 notes we're going to play. Think about the major scale again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In the major scale, the F sharp is the 6. Well, depending on whether we flatten it or keep it at the F sharp, either use F sharp or use F, we're going to open ourselves up to 2 different, very different scales, or if you were going to think of as modes. That's going to give us the key to be able to add a bunch of different notes into our soloing, which is going to completely shape the sound and the options you've got. All right, so let me put it together and show you what happens if we use the F sharp. All right, the F sharp would be using the 6th of the scale. So let's just run through it and play around with that using that F sharp. There's the F sharp again, there's our G, and there's our A. Let's see how that sounds. I'm thinking about using that F sharp as opposed to the F. All right, put a little backing track of that song I was talking about before, and let's see how it sounds. That's all using the F sharp. Now here how it sounds with using the F. That doesn't sound right. Here's the F sharp again. Now, why is it sounding better? Part of it is because we were using that D chord, and the D chord has the F sharp in it. So what we were doing was we were making use of F sharp. The fancy way to put it is we were actually using the A Dorian mode. So let me now pause and just talk a little bit about the Dorian mode, and then we'll come back and look at some other examples. Now, there are lots of different ways of explaining what modes are. I just think of them as modifications of scales. Just like we modified the major scale to give a minor pentatonic, we're just going to modify our major scale. I haven't talked about the second note in that scale, the B, so let's just throw that back in there, as people often do. The Dorian has these notes: A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, the octave. Then here's again, going all the way up, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. If you want, there's our B and there's our C. What we've got in the Dorian, in other words, is the flattened 3, that's C, and the flattened 7th, our G. Everything else stays the same from our major scale. We've just made 2 changes, C instead of C sharp and G instead of G sharp. If you think about the notes we've got, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, those are the same notes that are in the G major scale. So the G major scale, that is, really the G. So think about, if you were playing it, what the G major scale looks like. And people often think about boxes and positions, if that's the way you approach it. Just build on that. The G in the first position that people will call it will look like this. Up in the second position, it would look like this. We're just modifying that A major scale again, using the F sharp. And the F sharp in that case worked again because of the D chord. Let's bring in some other examples where you can see it in action. So let's use a slightly different chord progression this time, just a little modification of a Wilco song, just using an A minor and a G, where we're going to bring in again that F sharp. All right. So my bad imitation of Nels Cline. There's an F sharp. There's an F sharp again. All right, so again, what's going on there is we're making use of that F sharp. All right. Now, what's the alternative? We've got the A minor pentatonic. Now we've been talking about the A Dorian. Well, something else you might use is, instead of the F sharp, you might use the F. If we did that, we could find ourselves using what's called the A minor or the A natural minor scale. So let's just look at what that looks like and then just see some songs that it fits in with a little bit better than the Dorian does. Now, for the A minor scale, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our A major scale and modifying it three ways. We're going to be taking that C sharp and flattening it to a C. We're going to take that G sharp we've been talking about and flattening it to a G. And we're also going to take the sixth, that F sharp, and flatten it to an F. So we end up with a scale that looks like this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And that's one of the first scales people learn. You learn that that's the relative minor of the C major scale. Nothing but natural notes. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That kind of scale might be called for where we've got a chord progression that's using not, say, an F sharp, but an F. So here's a Neil Young song from a little bit from Walk Like a Giant that's making use of chords that have an F in them. So it's going to be an A minor, D minor with that F, A minor, F. And we'll hear how the F note now sounds better than the F sharp. All right, so let's go with that. Doesn't sound right. The F sounds better. already know that A natural minor scale, you actually know another mode. That one's known as the Aeolian mode. Again, it's got the flattened 3, the flattened 6, and the flattened 7th. As opposed to when we were doing the Dorian, which had the flattened 3, the flattened 6, the flattened 7th, but kept the 6 as it is in the major scale. That is the F sharp. So let's put all the pieces together, because what people often learn when you're playing the guitar is you learn that major scale and you learn how you can move it up and down the neck. Well, corresponding to these different modes we've been talking about, Dorian and Aeolian, as well as the others, there's always a corresponding major scale, which you can just sort of use if that helps you get your bearings when you're thinking about playing the guitar with patterns. So here's the order of modes and how to make use of them. The order of modes is what's known as Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. Come up with a mnemonic. I've got a silly one. All right, so that's one way to make use of modes. If somebody says, oh, this song is being played in A Dorian, you could think to yourself, well, I can try to remember for each of the modes which ones are being flattened and which one's being sharpened, but that gets kind of confusing. Or you can just say, let me figure out what the corresponding major one is, and then focus on the note in that major scale. So for instance, if we say it's an A Dorian, what's the corresponding major? Well, Dorian is 2. So you think to yourself, the G major scale has A as the second one. So essentially I'm playing the G major scale, but I'm focusing or maybe starting or giving highlights to the A note in it. That's how you bring out the A feel of it. You use the notes in the G, but you focus on the A. So that's what we did. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, A. But I hope what the real payoff of this little diversion into modes is to get you thinking really about, in the case of the Dorian, thinking about that 6th note. With the A, we're thinking about the F sharp or the F, and thinking about what chords you're playing with. Is the F going to go there or not? Is it the F sharp or is it the F? Well, look at the chords. And ideally, once you do this kind of stuff long enough, you don't need to think so much about the chords. You can start to develop an ear. You could hear, oh, wait a minute, it sounds better if I use the F sharp as opposed to the F. And so too in other scales. And I think that's ultimately the goal. The point of all this stuff is getting your ear to be better so that when you're playing with people, you can tell, okay, this sounds good, this sounds not so good, and go from there. This is a more formal way of approaching it. Some people are able to get it just by using their ear. For many of us, myself included, we need some guidance. I hope this gives you a bit of a way to proceed. Of course, everything we've done in the A goes for all the others. It's just a question of working through that scale, thinking about what the 1 is, what the 3 is, what the flat 3 is, what the 7th, what the flat 7th is, what the 6 is, what the flat 6. And then thinking about how you can always go to the corresponding major to give you some guidance, to help you remember, oh, it's this note or that note. All right, so I hope this is all of some use. Take it easy.